hiking, biking trails overmap. So we had the Active Transit Committee, and I'm going to let Eric introduce who's here for that, had a meeting last week. A lot of people attended, there was a lot of input, back and forth, etc. Based on that conversation, I attended the meeting in the back, did not participate in the meeting. The first thing you all need to understand, very, very clearly, please, this is only a concept, this is an idea, this is not anywhere near a stage where we're here tonight to say that this is what's happening or this is what's going through. The whole purpose of the public interaction is to get your feedback. Do I think that's a good idea, not a good idea? So let's not tar and feather the messengers. We're bringing you ideas, we're bringing you concepts, we're bringing you interest expressed by others in the community. We want your interest back, okay? So we're all Calistoga polite, we know that. The other thing I would ask, based on the experience last week, if you're raising your hand and somebody before you has made your point, don't feel obliged to remake the point. We heard it, we heard a lot last week, but again, it's just the opportunity for all of us to talk about this, express your concerns, and we'll move on from there. So at times, if it looks like we're repeating something, please forgive me for kind of moving it along, and I'll leave it to Eric to introduce who's here from the committee and fire away.
Great, thank you, Chris. I'm Eric from the Planning and Building Department. I've been assigned to be the designee for our Active Transportation Advisory Committee. Our advisory committee is made up of 5 members. So today we have Dieter Dice. He's been on the committee for a number of years, and Efron Gonzalez, who was recently appointed to the committee. Their efforts in the project have been huge. We've developed some draft plans that we're going to get to in a second, although I just wanted to give you a bit of background on the bicycle planning efforts that the city's been through in the past decade. So in 1990, the city had a general plan that actually included a bike plan within it. Then again in 2007, the city embarked on a process. We went out and sought public input, and we created an update to that plan in 2007. Subsequently, in 2012, in cooperation with the Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency, the city, along with all the other jurisdictions in the county, and the county, we developed a county-wide bicycle plan. And that's what you're seeing here today. This is our current bicycle plan that's in effect. And so it has a number of different designations for the bicycle network. We go from Class 1, Class 2 to Class 3. Class 1 is a separated pathway, it's off-road. Class 2 is generally on the shoulder, a striped lane. And then a Class 3 is just a signed bike route. So those are the designations, and they vary on the map by color. The solid versus the dashed is existing, so the solid is an existing. For example, Silverado Trail, existing Class 2. So if you all have been out there, you can see that there's a stripe and a shoulder for bicycling. The dashed is proposed bike lanes, or bike routes, or bike lanes. This plan is implemented over time. Generally, the life of a bicycle plan is 5 years, and that's based on the old Caltrans model. Caltrans used to have a bicycle transportation account where all the funding came, or most of the funding came from for implementation of bikeways and bike networks. Caltrans recently consolidated all of their funding sources, including the bicycle transportation account funding, with other funding sources, Safe Routes to School being one, and created an active transportation program. That active transportation program now has new guidelines. It not only includes bikes, but it also includes pedestrian networks. As a result, the City Council's directed staff to start work on creating a new bicycle and walking pedestrian plan. And so with the help of our active transportation plan, we've come up with a few different layouts for that plan. And we'll kind of be comparing the two here. So through our discussions with the Active Transportation Committee, we've come up with this plan. And I'll just point out we started, we took an inventory of our existing network and we decided what's working, what's not, what needs to be included, what needs to be deleted. So what we found is really there's very little that needs to be deleted, although we need to add a few things. So we first started looking at this area up here between Mora and Greenwood and Money Lane, and ultimately on our circulation element in our general plan, which is now going to be in process and will be coming out for public review here soon, you're going to find that there is a desire to connect Mora to Greenwood Avenue. In fact, there's already rights of way that exist in this area. And so to coordinate those two efforts, the general plan and this active transportation plan, we're suggesting and proposing that that road ultimately have a class 3 or a bike route, and then extend that up along Mora Avenue up to Route 29. Another area that we found that needed to be added was this area here down on Washington Street. As you can see from this map, it's currently designated as a class 3, which is just a bike route. Again, through these efforts and making sure that we include safe routes to school, which is this in blue here, you can see these are getting to either the junior and senior high school or the elementary school. There's a need for greater safety in this narrow stretch of Washington Street. And so the committee felt appropriate to designate this as a class 2 rather than a class 3. Looking a little closer down here at the southeastern edge of town, there's a lot going on here that was probably unnecessary. We had a southern crossing, and then we had this crossing proposed across the balance of property onto the Crystal Geyser and City Spray Field for a connection ultimately to the Vine Trail or this class 1 trail. We thought that that was a little too much. And so a little too much of a duplication between these two infrastructure projects. And so we ultimately deleted this line here at the southeastern city limits. Continuing up, you can see that it extends all the way to Silverado Trail. And I think that's probably why most of you are here, is because in looking at that, in order to better use the existing easements that were there and to create less encumbrance upon these properties, we shifted from the city limits line over to a similar alignment to the existing sewer and water easements that extend up to Silverado Trail. Also, seeing that there's some users out here, Solage Resort, the mobile home parks, we felt that it'd be a good opportunity to provide a safe path of travel for those users out to the Vine Trail and into town, rather than a less safe route down Brandon Street onto Lincoln Avenue, State Route 29. So we added this plan line here and shifted this over. The only other thing that we deleted, there was a class 1 connection between Lincoln Avenue and Grant Street. That's been deleted because the Vine Trail is there. That provides a safe route of travel to the downtown. In essence, those are the changes. As the mayor, oh yes, F1, if you mind passing those out, you guys, if you can't see these, you can share those with him. So as the mayor mentioned, this is really a fact-finding mission. Part of the recently adopted guidelines through Caltrans requires us to seek public input, which is good in any public process, to see where things that we didn't see or needed to be changed or deleted. And so that's why we're here tonight, really, is just seek the input of the community, find out what's working, what needs to be changed or added with regard to our bicycle network. So as he's passing those out, I'll give you a second just to, I only have 25 of them, so you're going to have to share with your neighbor. Again, the green ones. Some of you may have seen this before at a recent active transportation committee. Are there any questions on the bike plan itself?
So a shoulder for bicycle above Lincoln on the D9 is this plan?
Can you repeat that question? So he asked if a shoulder was planned on Lincoln Avenue.
No, I'm sorry. On 29 above Lincoln.
On Lake County Highway?
That's right.
Yes.
If you have a question, let me just give this to you so everyone can hear you. We'll see that. So hold it far away.
I have a very general question. I thought that the original purpose of the bike path that goes from Lincoln to Dunaville was so that bicyclists could avoid the traffic of Silverado Trail. So why on God's green earth are you trying to funnel them to Silverado Trail when there's really nothing there on that side of Silverado Trail? Brandon is a very easy access. It's right there next to Salage. I just don't understand the point of funneling traffic to Silverado Trail when there's nothing there for them to go to.
Well, the bike plan serves many different users. It's for resident population.
Yeah, I live on Pickett Road, and I come down Rosedale, I go across the street, I go down Brannon. It's not that difficult. It's not that unsafe. I don't understand why you're trying to funnel more traffic, more bicycle traffic specifically on the Silverado Trail when the original plan was to keep them off the trail with that bicycle path that goes all the way to Sterling.
Well, we don't want, I would disagree, we don't want to necessarily keep them off the Silverado Trail. Silverado Trail is a nice amenity for particular users. So as I was saying, we have different users. We have resident users, we have visitor users, and within those groups there are different types of bike riders. So, you know, in the resident population we have kids, we have young adults to seniors, and they all have different needs. And then the visitor group, there's also different needs. So looking at Silverado Trail, this serves a particular need. There's going to be a need for a pass-through. Some of the cyclists don't want to necessarily go through downtown. They may want to pass through. Just like our circulation plan and the general plan, it considers a pass-through that gets away and outside without having to go through the downtown.
Isn't that defeating the purpose too? Wouldn't you want bicyclists to go into town?
Absolutely. We want both. We want both situations. We want an area for them to go around on the periphery, and then we want a route for them to go into town.
The Silverado Trail is one of the most biked roadways in the entire United States. It's one of the big tourist and visitor draws to the entire Napa County is the Silverado Trail. Now, ironically, it happens to be one of the more dangerous ones in the country. With that said, we have to be able to, or would like to be able to accommodate the different user purposes that Eric's mentioning. Now, that's not to say that what's being proposed, again, these are just suggestions from getting from point A to point B, is going to happen, and this is the feedback we take. But we can't lose sight of the fact that the Silverado Trail is one of the most biked roadways in the entire country.
And so I guess the takeaway is you don't think that this is necessary?
No.
Right here.
Yeah, Eric, my first question is the proposed bridge on the north side of the mobile home park. What direction is that going? Is that going to be cutting across to Champagne Circle?
Yeah, there's a small open area there, a triangle of sorts, and so it would be, you know, it says bridge here. It could be any type of crossing, but there would need to be a crossing to get from bike path into the mobile home parks.
Okay, but is that proposed to go across the Central Creek or across the main ditch?
It would have to go, if it extended this way, it'd have to go across the Central Creek and then the main ditch.
So it wouldn't actually, by the way, my name's Mike Oliver, I'm the manager of Chateau Calistoga, and this is my wife. So that bridge would not be going on to into the mobile home parks?
It would.
It would be?
That's what's proposed.
Okay, now my comment is, I've been in contact with the property owner, and I'm speaking on his behalf. We know at the last meeting we was here, and there was a lot of opposition on this, proposed close to our property line. He's, at this point, would like to stand with his residents on all opposition on this proposal.
I've spoken with him too,
Okay.
at that meeting and after, and then we exchanged some emails
Okay.
subsequently. And I get his position, he doesn't want it,
Yeah.
nor would he agree to it.
Yeah.
Again, this is a fact-finding mission, we're putting out some ideas and suggestions. If the community likes these, and ultimately if they're supported by the city council, then that's what we'll go into the plan.
The one request I'll make on that, and I know there's a lot of folks here from those particular properties, fact-finding, getting it. For 1 minute, I ask you to change your perspective. Don't look at this as a bridge into your community. Look at this as an opportunity for your community to access a potential bike path. Okay, so think of it both ways. With that said, we're hearing clearly some concerns expressed by it, but we all make our opinions, we all make our statements based on what we want, what we do, what we like. This wasn't ever designed with the perspective of how do we funnel people in. This was specifically put there to say, how do we give these residents access? And if that's not wanted, this is part of that process.
Okay, Chris, we're private property. We've already
Listen, totally understand. The whole purpose of this bridge was to get your residents out. If there's no interest, bridge goes away. Okay? That's been clear. I don't want that point repeated. I heard it 20 times the other night. Clear. Okay? If there's no interest in your community to access this potential pathway, it's your private property. Nothing we can do about it. Very simply stated as well, this particular cross here over to the Silverado Trail, we're very well aware of how those property owners currently feel about this. At the end of the day, regardless of what your council thinks or your bike committee thinks, if those private property owners don't want to give up easement, and we can encourage them and educate them why they should or shouldn't, or etc., then that doesn't happen. So that's why I'm saying, remember, this is here just to get input. This is far from a done deal. We don't want anyone, Rome is not burning.
I'm just making
I totally appreciate that. Totally appreciate that. But my only point in your comment, which I appreciate, is let's change our perspective. Okay, it can go both ways. It can get you out of your community, and yes, there is a potential, which is a safety risk, of getting others into your community. Yes?
I'm concerned about the Silverado Trail. The police say that that's one of the worst traffic in the world there. I have seen cars have 3 cars, and so I would question whether it's safe to bikers.
I would agree, and I've seen bikers who do interesting things, but more often than not, I see drivers who do very bad things, including this morning on my way to Napa.
Just a quick question, what's the minimum width of a class 2 bike path?
The minimum would be 4 feet.
4?
4 feet, yeah, it's a Caltrans standards, and they actually would go by meters, but it ends up being a 4-foot width.
But we don't have that on Silverado Trail.
No, it's actually larger than that.
Well, not when I've gone around some of the curly Qs on Silverado Trail, it's about this wide.
Yeah.
That's not 4 foot.
Well, it's never a perfect world, right?
Well, I asked for the minimum width.
Yeah, and so the Caltrans standard says a minimum of 4 feet.
Also,
That doesn't mean they're always built to that.
And also in the state of California now, as most of you are aware, in addition to, regardless of where the bike path is, or regardless of where a biker is, whether they're in the bike path or not, you are now required by law to give them a 3-foot clearance on all elements around them. That's a street, that's in a wide street, etc. Okay, so it's all about safety first.
And that's the short answer. There's many different assumptions you have to make. There's speed, there's the curves that you have to assume, and then there's some parking, is the travel way, so there's a lot to it.
Well, how do you give them a 3-foot leeway? If you're traveling one direction, you've got a car coming another direction. So how are you supposed to give them a 3-foot leeway? And like Ryan just said, Silverado Trail, lots of places doesn't have more than maybe a 2-foot. They ride side by side, and they pay no attention to cars. I thought bikes were under the same restriction as cars. They have to follow the car's rules. This is almost impossible. I saw downtown the other day, there was 5 of them going by Calmar. They were single file, but there was a car already starting to turn between Wilkinson and Calmar. They paid no attention, they did not stop, nothing, they kept right on going, and I thought that third bike rider, he was going to clip, and he hit his brakes. I mean, I could hear him squealing. So they pay no attention to cars whatsoever. I think they need to come back and start following some of the rules as well.
You have a good point, and actually there's much more to the plan than just these maps. There's policy sections, and then there's a discussion about education. So all that together makes
Tickets?
the plan. There's enforcement section. Actually, per the guidelines, there's education, enforcement, engineering, and so of those components, we have a discussion on how to not only educate the drivers, we also need to educate bicyclists and the pedestrians about how to use the road. And so an effort of our Active Transportation Committee was to start off by creating some safe bicycling guidelines. And so we have two different types of cards. We have a smaller card that you can stick in your pocket, or we have a larger card that's on the desk that you can have to carry around. And our committee,
all the hotels around here?
yes, we passed them out at all the hotels, and so they should have those. It's an acronym. It spells out Calistoga, and then for each letter of Calistoga, it's got a different example of how to be safe on bicycle.
If we can just, again, let's remember perspective. We may not be bicyclists ourselves. Statistically, there are far more drivers on the road. So statistically, there are far more drivers who don't follow the rules, don't pay attention to other cars. This is not am I a pro biker or a con biker? This is cycling is going to happen. Cycling is going to happen everywhere around the world. Cycling is happening everywhere around the world. It's a matter of how do we all get along on what we have available to us to make it safe, not just for the cyclists, but also for the drivers. So we can all cite examples of bad behavior on bicycles, myself included. I've been caught on my bicycle on my cell phone, very bad behavior. Today I'm driving down the Silverado Trail and I watch somebody pass in a no passing lane in a car. So let's not do the one-off anecdotes. We all know that everyone can behave much better, and as Eric said, part of the Active Transit Committee's responsibility is to help educate. If it gets to the point where we have to ticket cyclists, then indeed we also ticket drivers who don't give cyclists the right of way when they're supposed to. So this is a two-way street that we're all going to share, and this young lady's been waiting quite a while.
I'm concerned about Lincoln Avenue. I don't care what the signs say. I am riding on the sidewalk. I'm not a 12-year-old hotshot, and I get off my bicycle if, you know, there's people coming, but I am not going to get out on Lincoln Avenue the way it is. Is there any hope of ever making something safe on Lincoln Avenue?
You're talking about in the downtown area?
Yes.
It's been heavily debated. It's Caltrans right away, so that they really have the primary say in what goes there. That is one that I failed to mention. Actually, in our previous plan, we didn't recognize Lincoln Avenue in the downtown area as having any bicycle facilities. So having recognized that, we added it to a class 3. So at least we're starting to take steps forward to make it safer for bicyclists. So it's a difficult situation because of the Caltrans involvement. It's talked about in our general plan, but today we're just making these little steps to make it safer.
Okay, so
Projected.
I will. Could you please educate us a little bit on the distinctions between Class 1, Class 2, Class 3? Because I really don't understand that, and especially when you start talking about Washington Street by the monastery, making that a Class 2 or 3. What in the world does that mean? You can't physically increase the size of the road. And second of all, are there any studies that actually show that doing this kind of work actually improves safety? Or is it just making more jobs?
So I'll qualify that by saying that this is a planning feasibility study. It isn't the design of any of these particular projects that are called out. Once we get into design, that's when we start having to look at the actual roadway section to see if all these improvements can fit. So knowing that, the Class 1 is a separated path. It's not within the roadway travelway, it's not connected to the vehicular circulation paths. A Class 2 is a striped shoulder. It's only protected by usually a 6 to 4 inch fog line or stripe. A Class 3, which is a bike route, is just a sign. You probably see them green with a bike that says bike route. That's just to identify that there could be bikes traveling on the roadway. no safety other than common vehicular code safety.
On the safety element, so they took all the elected officials for the county of Napa, threw us on a bus, drove us to Davis, and put us on bicycles. Okay, Davis is considered to be the most bike-friendly city in the United States. Now, mind you, they'll admit it took them 50 years to get there, but a lot of communities, Napa County included, are taking advantage of their key learnings. The studies clearly show in Davis, over those 50 years of improvements to their biking, that not only was it safer for bikers, but car on pedestrian hits went down, and it was safer for drivers of cars as well, because it forces you to pay more attention to what's out there. So there is absolutely empirical data that says, yes, when you make some of these changes, it gets safer, not just for cyclists, but drivers and pedestrians as well. And this young lady's next.
I would like you to speak to the rationale of that bypass area that the woman was talking about. The one on Silverado around Rosedale, I believe it is.
Yeah, actually, this was part of the countywide plan. So we've taken that and really mirrored it on this plan. So when it was originally considered here, there was a need for those inexperienced riders that travel Silverado Trail to get off and to enjoy other parts of Napa County. And so this was thought to be a safer route of travel coming around Pickett to Rosedale and back on the Silverado.
How far is that in mileage?
It's 1.8 miles from Pickett Road to town.
So this is a half a mile or 0.5, so you're probably looking at...
No, the whole loop, just from Pickett Road to downtown Lincoln Avenue, it's 1.8 miles.
And that's just with one quick thought that I had, and I bike from our town to St. Helena, and that area of Silverado Trail that you're thinking of bypassing is one of the safest of the whole area between Calistoga and St. Helena. So
it'll still stay a bike route.
Right,
This is just a more scenic.
Right, so I was just wondering about the necessity of the funding if we could put it in somewhere else that maybe it would be more helpful.
This actually is a county-maintained road,
Okay,
so
so
it doesn't have a lot of bearing on us.
Okay.
But what it does is for planning purposes, as projects get developed, then we start implementing its plan. So that would be a trigger to develop.
Eric?
I just wanted, since tonight's about fact-finding, this is a little off, but I really wanted to ask how many people here really know about the Vine Trail and what impact it's going to have on Calistoga, and really get a show of hands and numbers, and how many of you have never heard of it. So, how many people have never heard of the Vine Trail?
I've never
Heard of it, but okay, don't know much about it. Let's say I've maybe heard the words, but I don't know anything about it. Can we get a count? Can we get a count? I don't have my lenses, so.
There's enough. I'll explain what it is. I sit on the board.
Okay. And how many of you have some knowledge about it, but not much? And how many of you feel you're well informed about the Vine Trail?
Okay, so thank you. So the Napa Valley Vine Trail, NVVT, I sit on the board of directors for that. All municipalities are represented. So the goal of the Napa Valley Vine Trail is to have a bicycle route that takes you from Vallejo?
Yes.
Vallejo to Calistoga. It's 47 miles. The primary objective is the majority of those 47 miles, the vast majority, to be Class 1, which means separated from the roadway, and completely separate path. So Calistoga will actually be the trailhead for that route. It's an amazing thing to undertake. It's 47 miles. It's about $55 million, including an endowment to maintain it. It's all going to be private funding, federal and state grants. By the end of next year, we'll have 12 of the 47 miles completed. The long term is hopefully within a 10-year period, all 47 miles done. That will allow us as residents to hike, bike, and walk completely separated from 29 and Silverado Trail. It's a pretty amazing endeavor to the point where it's grabbed the attention of the feds. They're interested in it. It hits health and wellness, all that good stuff. I can go on for hours about the impact to our economy it's going to have from cycling tourists. Cycling tourists are the ones who per capita spend more money than any other tourist we have, even than just the straight wine buyer on a per capita basis. Put the tourist aside, it's going to be a great thing connecting all the communities in Napa County without having to use your car should you so wish. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, Tom. It's very important to understand that we are going to be the trailhead for that. It's an awesome thing to have, just for ourselves, never mind for the visitors to come. So part of kind of the stress behind this is to make sure that, you know, when they get here, they've got other ways, including, and more importantly, in my opinion, our kids have other ways to get around. One of the most amazing things I saw when I went to Davis is we rode by a school that was in session. 66% of the kids in that middle school rode their bikes to school. And it was just, and in a community like ours where we're small, we're flat, and we're relatively slow speeds, there is no reason we couldn't have a situation like that. And it's all a matter of having the will and the commitment to do this. And now the state is not only saying, do you need to have the will and the commitment, you are mandated to do this. So we want to make sure that we're, you know, acknowledging that, the importance of it, the impact for, you know, kids and childhood obesity and all that fun stuff. But specific to the Vine Trail, it's an amazing thing that's coming our way. So we want to make sure we're part of that.
Chris, can I point out?
Please.
We actually have that indicated on the map. It's this yellow stripe that goes from the Oak Hill Mine Trail down Lincoln to Fairway, down Fairway where it joins the existing path down to Washington to Dunwell. And actually, we have through the State Conservancy Department a grant of $50,000 to do the design work for this section from Lincoln down to the Little League field. It's $60,000. It pays for the engineering and environmental work. Once that design work is done, we'll go out and seek grant funding for its construction. It'll be a shovel-ready project. We think that it will be funded. That section will be complete. We already have a large section that will be complete as a result of the Indian Springs project. And so we may be the first community within the county to have the complete section of the Vine Trail developed in the next 5 years. So we're very fortunate to have that funding. Just want to point out.
Eric, Mr. Oliver here was kind enough to lend me his copy of the plan for the county. Not the most thrilling stuff to read, I'll have to admit, but after reading it, I didn't see anything about this area around Chateau Calistoga, and which leads me to believe that this is something pretty new. A lot of the concern about that is we've referred to it, that ditch for a long time as a ditch, but it's more than that. It's a wildlife habitat. And a lot of the people who have bought homes and brought them in there purposely had them backed in so that their front porch faced across the creek so that they could see Mount Washington and the vineyards on the east. They're concerned about having bicyclists and hikers that just on just the other side of the creek. It's a matter of privacy. And those who have had it put in with a porch facing the street, their bedrooms are back there. And particularly this time of year when it's warm, you got your windows open. You don't want people riding by 30 feet from your back window. So we're concerned about that. There are ducks that swim back there. There are little finches that I don't see over my side. There are quail sitting on the fence down there by the vineyards. It's a very pleasant place to sit and look out, and they value their privacy. And speaking of values, if their privacy was taken away, that would actually lower the value of their home. And when seniors go to sell their houses for one reason or another, we don't want to lower the value.
So I'm going to let Eric talk to the environmental issue first, because as we, coincidental to our previous conversation about Berry Street Bridge, you're all very well aware of the impact that the environmental agencies have on this. So again, concept, throw an idea out. We could get to a point where the entire community, every single person who lives here says that's a great idea, and then we go to environmental, which Eric will talk about now, and that at the end is the be all and the end all for the ducks and the finches. So,
right, so as soon as one of these become a project as defined by the California Environmental Quality Act, then we have to take a look and assess all the environmental effects that the project will have on the environment. And just like the gentleman with the Berry Street project mentioned, there's cultural resources, biological resources, traffic, noise, air, all of those things get assessed. If we can find that there's potentially significant impacts, then we have to mitigate them. If we can't mitigate them, then we have to prepare an EIR. Without really looking in depth at this area, I think that we will find that there's probably going to be a potentially significant impact, especially on biological resources, as you mentioned. I know that this area over here behind Solage was reserved as a wetland that has special status species in it, as well as the ditch. Our hope is to not even touch the ditch, but we still have to assess its impacts on those species. Ultimately, if the project was desired and we went forward and did it, there is mitigation available for wetlands. You can do replacement wetlands. You can create habitats off-site or on-site that will be preserved in the future for those species. But right now, this is just a planning and feasibility study. So we haven't got into the nitty-gritty of each of these projects that are proposed, but we would in the future, ultimately, if this was adopted and implemented.
Regarding property values, the immediate perception is if I have people passing by, my property value goes down. The studies that we have been able to pull out, study after study after study, actually shows that there are property improvements based upon the proximity of that trail to you. Obviously, that's part of what gets taken into consideration when we do this in the environmental impact. So it's absolutely not true to say that a bike path anywhere near me reduces my property value. We can show time and time again where it does have a positive impact or a neutral impact on that. But it is, so again, something that you've got to consider and take into consideration. And we have the mic back here, and then we'll come back to it.
So, if you would like to go from the bike path to Silverado Trail, I can think of two other points that would make more sense rather than just riding willy-nilly across to Silverado Trail. Fisher's building a new tasting room. Almost, it's really the proximity of the bike trail is, the existing bike path is ridiculous. If you're going to have it come off, shouldn't you be sending it to someplace like either Aubert or the new tasting room going in front of there? Isn't there a way they can go, that bike path could go through some kind of city right of way that would encroach on a new private property and head to a tasting room that is on Silverado Trail? So there is kind of, with that Vine Trail and tourist dollar in mind, give them a place to go that also connects them to the trail rather than just having them cut across and go.
Exactly our thinking. We moved it from the eastern city limits because there was really nothing along this and there was a single family home here. The reason for moving it to this side is there's already single family home.
Yeah.
Did I hear that comment?
As opposed to a community of 200 homes?
I see what you're saying. You're right, it's near there, but it's not in their front yard and across.
30 feet from us?
The point being is that there are these two wineries here, and it would go right in their front yard and be able to access those two wineries. And so that's the
Yeah, but
intent.
Fisher's further down, so.
Fisher's is in the county, and we've lost that opportunity. So our jurisdiction is within the city
You
limits.
can't even get him to say as a property owner, yes, I'd love to have bicycle traffic come to my,
So
Put it there.
understand the scope of anything that we do. We can't create a bike path that leads them to a commercial endeavor. Okay, so the point of the Vine Trail, the point of our biking path system,
but he also has that great
let
driveway
me
there.
finish, is not to, and the intent when laying this out is not how do we get people closer to a winery, how do we get people closer to a restaurant, is how do we get people across, enjoying the natural beauty, blah, blah, blah. So the point on the Fisher side is we can't plan on that because it's county. The county had the opportunity during the approval process for Fisher and it didn't do that. So now we go forward and we start to talk to the property owners within our jurisdiction, the Fredianis, Levisis, etc., to see if there's interest there. At this point, they expressed to us last week some considerable concern, So we take that into consideration. Again, please, this is not anywhere near the case where it's going to go for approval to the council anytime soon, okay?
We talked about August 4th, the active transportation plan, reconsidering this. I imagine that there'll even be a third meeting in September with the active transportation plan again, when they not only look at the maps, but they're also looking at all the text within the active transportation plan. And there's a lot to that too. And I don't know if they can do it all in one meeting. There may even be another meeting. So there's going to be many different opportunities. And ultimately, if you can't make any of those meetings, the city council has public comment period in consideration.
Mr. Flynn, and then
Okay, our experience with the existing bike path is it creates a lot of trespassers. Not necessarily, the normal bicycle folks will go out there and just set up a picnic in the middle of your vineyard the day after you sprayed. There's re-entry periods for even all the organic chemicals. We've had issues with that. We've had issues with windows being broken, valves being opened or shut. I know the city public works people have had the same problem with their facilities that are directly behind our property with just some shenanigans going on, and we've had a tractor, trying to be driven off with a couple of kids, and they all gained access from the existing bike path. What ideas or what measures, since some of these proposed paths are going to be going through private property and very close to residents and businesses and things like that, can we, what ideas do you have to minimize this problem with hooligans and so forth?
So imagine the 47 miles going from Vallejo to Calistoga.
All the private properties.
All the private properties you're traversing. You can try as best you can to mitigate as many things as possible. What you can never mitigate for is bad behavior. Okay? And that's bad behavior on behalf of a cyclist, a pedestrian, or a driver. So what we do is our absolute best with the resources available to minimize that impact. Now, if you have a private property and the city comes to you or the county comes to you and says, hey, we'd love to send a path along your border, etc., that's where we are in the USA. It's your private property. You can say, hell no, I won't go, whatever the case may be, or you can say, here are some of the benefits that might happen. We are never going to be able to mitigate for trespass, vandalism, etc. What we do, and the lodging properties in Calistoga do it, it's encouraged everywhere else in the county, is what Eric talked about, which is the Calistoga card, but there's also another program called Ag Respect. And the Respect outlines what you should not be doing, what you need to be aware of. This community is very happy last year that we passed a right to farm ordinance in Calistoga. That requires anyone sleeping in Calistoga, as a visitor, to be informed if they're in reasonable proximity to a farming property that you may be woken up in the middle of the night by fans and tractors. There may be spraying that happens, but you know what? You came to the wine country for the wine country experience. That's the wine country experience. Totally agree. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop them from, we could be there and greet every one of them and tell them what's good and bad behavior. It doesn't stop them. Right, exactly. So
I was polite
yeah,
at first.
and we appreciate you being polite. And then some people, don't understand, don't have boundaries in their lives. We're never going to solve for that. What we're trying to do is provide a route system that's great for locals, great for visitors, back to great for locals. The bike thing is happening has happened around the world. The bike thing is happening in Calistoga. It's good for a whole bunch of reasons. When you do the pro and con list, the con list is relatively short, but we want to take all that into consideration. Public health and safety, trespass, all that stuff. You're on.
Thank you. Clarification, please. When you had that meeting the other afternoon, I had asked specifically about the path where it would run along Champaign and out to Brannan, and talked about the culvert and asked about the bridge that would come over. And I understood you to say that the traffic would not come onto Champaign, or that, whatever that's called, that, whatever that drive is, but that it would cover the culvert was the plan, or run on the opposite side of it.
Opposite side.
So now you're saying it wouldn't be the opposite side, that the bridge would bring the traffic over to, am I misunderstanding you?
Yeah, the path still stays on the opposite side of the culvert from the park.
Okay.
The only bridge conversation was giving access to the residents to get out to that.
Oh, okay.
So that was not using your driveway or that property there by any stretch of the
And again, it was designed, thought about for the residents to get out and enjoy, this pathway.
Yeah,
But
which they do without the pathway. Just so you know, I mean, but then I had
But
another question.
I should mention, there are currently no easements to do that.
Well, they can go.
They can, but they respect behavior.
No, let me ask you a question, because, you've got the city limits on this draft.
Hold the mic up, please.
You've got the city limits on this draft. And then you talked about running I thought I saw one of these drafts that had another path that was running along here.
No, it was just this.
Always just that one?
Always just that.
Okay.
And then this would be the bridge that connects and allow the residents out.
Okay, so the path is on the opposite side.
Opposite side of the culvert.
Did I not answer your question? You're waving furiously. We don't want to be on your property anymore. We don't want to give you a bridge.
No, that's
We're actually just going to close the whole thing off. How's that sound?
Can I answer my question now? I was just wondering, the bridge itself going from Champaign that you're proposing to do, would it be like a gated bridge, crossing so people couldn't come in, but we can go out?
If we were to go there, there's a whole bunch of options you can do. We've been in communities where, I've seen communities, Davis has this in a couple of private neighborhoods, where you have each of the residents in that neighborhood has a pass key to get you out the gate where others can't come in. If we were to get that route, you could absolutely do something of that nature. But again, I could climb over the fence, throw my bike over, all that fun stuff. So we're going to go to this young lady over here. Right, so when we build the big bridge over to your property.
I'm just wondering the main reason for putting that around the mobile home park. Because you're saying that in the not too far future, as things go, you're going to have this nice path right along Lincoln Avenue, and some people now are afraid to do Lincoln Avenue. I can understand that. But it's not going to be that long before it's going to be a separate bike path all along Lincoln Avenue, all the way down Washington. And so I guess I'm not seeing the reason for that in that other bike.
The reason for running that path was to give more path distance for people to ride, also to give the residents adjacent to that the opportunity to get on that path. And again, part of the process here, part of the feedback process is if you tell us that the however many 100 people live in that neighborhood has zero interest, will ever have zero interest, future residents will never ever want to use a bike path adjacent to their property, then there's nothing to talk about. But we have to be able to hear everyone. And again, I know to be very true, there are members of that community in that neighborhood who think this is the best idea in the world. And it's one of the biggest challenges we have as a city. And by the way, your active transportation group, some of us are elected, Barnes and I, we put ourselves up for it. These guys are all volunteers. And they're here to serve us to say, hey, what's the best way to kind of handle these things? So let's just kind of keep that in mind. We want that perspective from everyone. And Ellie, we'll go over here.
Absolutely.
I work in the visitor center, so I talk to a lot of people who come to town to visit and ride bicycles. And they just want more interesting places to ride. Just little places, little different tracks. So I'm looking at this map here, and the part of this path that goes from Brandon Street down to where the culvert or the bridge, whatever that is there, why couldn't you just do that part and then go to the left of the trail and not go to the right, so that it wouldn't go past those people who are in the back that block off their view or whatever, or walk past there? Yeah, just take that piece off.
Well, part of it is to get people out to the Vine Trail, to bypass the city. So that would be part of the reasoning there. The other thought I think Clarence raised at the active transportation was, since he owns property up here, was to delete this section.
Oh, that's his part.
So there's, it could be either way. We put it as the whole thing just to get the communities in.
All right, hold on. You haven't asked a question yet, so you're next.
Thank you. Right behind Chateau Calistoga on the north side is an apartment complex, and they have since removed their fence, and there's no 4-foot section that won't take out their parking lot to build your bike, pedestrian. How are you gonna do that?
It's a good question. And they actually submitted a letter to me late this afternoon with a lot of those types of questions.
And the garden?
Yeah, and so what I told her, the park or the Lapadera representative from Bridge Housing, was if Bridge Housing is open to having a pathway through their facility, we will design the pathway with the least resistance. Having to affect trees, having to affect parking, having to affect their community garden. So the problem is we don't know, we haven't designed a pathway yet to know exactly how it would.
You guys just come up with ideas and you don't go and look and see what.
Well, we don't, once we have the plan in place, we don't take our hammers out and start building.
No, I understand, but I mean, if you guys have been over there to look, there's no way possible.
Right, so we put on the plan a general alignment of where the plan would go. And so when we get into a project and working with them, at that point, at least having it on the plan assures us that we can design it through their property in some fashion.
But on behalf of Chateau Calistoga, as a volunteer, I'd like to present 50+ signatures opposed to this.
The point I'd like to make one point there. Most of us, myself included, in this community, I don't see anyone in this room that can say otherwise, and I'll be corrected. So I'm going to venture to say all of us in this room live somewhere that wasn't what it was originally. We all live on land that wasn't originally intended to be housing, that wasn't originally businesses that weren't originally supposed to be businesses where they are. So we don't willy-nilly throw something on a map, because if we were to look at, you go back to the early maps of Calistoga, the 2,200 acres that we started at, there were 3 streets in town. Okay, so if you looked at that and said, that's it, this is what it's going to be forever and nothing changes, 90% of the people in this room wouldn't be living here, you'd be living somewhere else. So we have to be very careful about where we stand today, what our perspective is today, because 30 years ago, 100 years ago, was a very different perspective. So what we do is we get an idea to go through using Lapadera as a concept, and we ask them, okay, would this be something you'd ever consider? Mr. Levisi's property, is this something you'd ever consider? So that's how you have to start this process. David, you have a loud voice, I'm not going to walk all the way back there.
I would just ask that you folks, you mentioned that this is one side of it. You also had some things around safety and training and teaching. I would ask that you have an article that just talks about what you're planning to do on that side, because honestly, I think that will do more for safety than almost everything you're talking about here.
That's a good point, and that's our approach, is to at least get some buy-in to what these plans represent, and then come back with the full document, and that will describe, lay out all the policies and all the suggestions for safety, education, enforcement, which is a critical component of the plan.
Yes, sir. You've described Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3, but I also see a blue line that says proposed safe routes to schools. Can you explain what that is and how safe that is compared to Class 1 and 2?
Your voice is going, Eric. You're talking a lot.
So the safe routes to school, it really sets up a priority. Another piece of the plan will be a priorities list from high, medium to low. And so we'll set some priorities. Safe routes to school is a high priority as we see it. So as we present that out to the public, we'll be asking, are these the priorities that you as well see? Are these the high priorities? Are these the medium? Or are these the low? I imagine another high priority, just as indicated here with another plan line, would be the Vine Trail, being that that's taken a lot of publicity and there's funding available for it. Both of those projects have funding sources available. Things that may be on the lower priority list may be areas of town like this that don't have an associated street to it. Funding's not available. It's not in the near term. Does that answer your question?
Well, I asked what a proposed safe route to school looks like. How wide, or is it separate from the street?
It's
Because
based
if I go by
on what's called out. So in certain sections, you're going to find, like on this Brandon Street, it's a class 3, but it goes across Lincoln Avenue. So there may be the policy that calls out for a crossing, some sort of crossing across Lincoln. But it will have the same designation as either the class 1, class 2, or 3 that are called out here. It's really for priority in the policies that are supporting this.
And it's the number one funded bicycle project in the state is Safe Routes to School for obvious reasons. You want these kids to be able to pop their helmets on and get out there. You had another question here.
Just 2 quick things. When you have a class 2 bike trail, is that assuming it will be bilateral?
No, not necessarily. You may have certain sides of the street being developed before other sides. We have a good example out on Grant Street where we have a particular section that's already a class 2. So no, it may not be that those get developed at the same time. But it could be. It just depends on the improvements that are happening at that particular point in time.
And then the funding for the aesthetics, I'm hoping I will also be able to fund some aesthetics along the existing Dunawell trail or the existing bike trail that we have, because when I bike there, it looks like there's a junkyard and it's not Calistoga's best side. And I'm just wondering, is there going to be fencing, or is that in the plan?
City yard.
So that's the Vine Trail element. So the Vine Trail does have an arts element to it. The idea is to put up as little fencing as possible in terms of shielding. But there's the rest stops. There's 15 rest stops that are very decorative and artistic. There'll be art elements along the trail, etc. But similar to people with bad behavior and doing bad things, not everybody. People have different opinion of what their yard should be, and we just sort of go from there. So it's the primary purpose is safety first, then we talk aesthetics. Any funding set aside for Vine Trail aesthetically is art enhancement.
This is the city's bad area. It's
Oh,
not
the city yard?
Yeah.
Oh, no. We're
You're doing something
absolutely.
about that. Okay, thanks.
We're aware of that. Yeah, no, well, we are exempt, but we're not going to do that. Yes, you don't need a mic, I know that.
I just have one quick comment. If the proposed bike path goes through, when once a year they have their Pro-Am Amgen, or when there's 10,000 bicyclists going through, is that going to be cutting right through there to
no,
from Silverado Trail?
No. Amgen's all those bike routes, and even though Race to the Cure, Tour de Cure, etc., all those stay on the primary routes. Some of them as unsafe as safely as possible. Now, when we have the actual Vine Trail, that'll be kind of a target for that. Where it's a speed race, it always has to stay as close to the highways as possible, or main streets. When it's like Tour de Cure, which is kind of more of a leisurely thing, then you can get off the routes. Because remember, even the Vine Trail itself is going to, the Vine Trail itself is going to have strollers and walkers and all that. So you don't want to encourage bikes at 40, 50 miles an hour. Then,
Chris, I want to compliment you guys for having this and let everybody know, because I'm going to do a crash commercial right now. Anybody that's interested in what went on tonight and last week, take out your pencil, piece of paper, write down chateaucalistoga.org. All this is on there. And if you go to YouTube, Radio Calistoga Live. All of the information is up there. Everybody's got to make their own decisions. I would like to ask you, Pam, didn't I see some posters around here that said "Not my backyard"? Anybody that's interested in that, you might want to take a look at it. It might give you an idea what other communities have faced with bike paths.
so the disclaimer that I now need to give, since you posted yours,
Yes.
You're welcome to visit his website, but it is absolutely positively not an extension of the city process, the city meeting process, or any official site in any way, shape, or form, but you are posting.
I thank you for that, because I was going to add that on to the end. I don't want anybody to think that that has something to do with the city. However, I am...
I hope you're only getting my good side on that camera.
I am. Except for last week.
Well,
okay. But in any case, no, I am serious. For people, let me just add, the one website has over 30,000 visitors. Okay? And it goes literally all over the world. This last week, since I posted the last thing on there, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 visitors, new visitors that came in, and they've come in from Australia, from New Zealand, from the Mediterranean, from China.
That's why.
They're all looking, well, they type in Calistoga and they get it, and then they look at it. The idea is that we are showing people that it's an open community. You guys aren't hiding anything. People are out voicing their opinions, and I think that's a credible thing to show visitors coming to town that we really are working a process.
We got 5 minutes, so I'm going to point this to folks who have not asked a question or made a comment yet.
I said 5 minutes.
A number of facts. Number one, where it is designed to go from the Washington Street extension across next to the behind the park, there is no bridge there, and it doesn't show that there needs to be a bridge there. Okay.
Are you talking about a Pioneer Park?
No. Here.
No, back there behind the.
Back here. When you look at it right here, there is no bridge there. There needs to be a big red cross there, because I've had people come down here and they reach here and they go, oh, I have to go through the wall next to all the spray rigs to get over here to get back here. The crossing is here.
And I'm glad you said that, the crossing. I think what we need to do is change this from bridge to crossing, because it could be.
But there's no crossing here either.
That's what I'm saying. My thought was that this wasn't going to be an official bridge, but it was more a culvert crossing. So I think what we'll do is we'll change this to crossing and then put a designation.
This is 15 feet wide.
I understand.
Okay.
So that could be a big culvert.
Okay. Secondly, factually, we have the right-of-way here, and without going into the details, our right-of-way that we gave to the city explicitly excludes any use of that right-of-way except for utilities and the maintenance of utilities. This is also, if anything goes on here, you have all the problems of the vineyards, etc. This is over 80 feet wide from here to here. 80 feet. Totally unobstructed. All the way. You could take and do all kinds of interesting things here and make it safe and make it work. Secondly, the last thing I want to say.
That's third.
Well, I'm going to go on the fourth line. Is I think that this is an incredible project. I am thoroughly in favor of it. I think we all have, a number of different people have different objections to specific parts, so everybody's kind of zeroing in on the parts they're objecting to. But the reality is, this brings together a huge amount of thinking and planning and expertise and really good looking into the future, and can make the community just a richer community. And I think we cannot lose sight of that. No matter how many, there are numbers of tinkerings here and there that have to be done. There's practical. For example, if you're going to have there's an indication of a walkway past Mount Washington on the south side. It's a rock cliff. You know, either you're going to have to move the whole road, or you're going to blast out 10 feet of rock hill. So
we'll only use dynamite, so it's not bad. Don't worry about it.
You understand what I'm saying here? There are a few things that are, like you said, you put the routes in you where you're thinking they're going to go, but when you actually, like somebody said, take a look at them, and the practicality comes into play.
Right. Well, that is a class 2, and it's already there, so we wouldn't change anything on Mount Washington. But back to your earlier point, when we originally spoke, when we were drafting this plan, that's why we had it here, is because you thought that this would be a cool amenity. Would you be open to perhaps looking at that again? Moving it back to this side?
No. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, you said you were open to having, you know, 80 feet of room to play with on this side on the city limits. Is that something that you'd be willing to talk? Maybe we can do that.
Don't put him on the spot.
Later.
The answer is no. There's different opinions on that.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Marcia Beecham. I have only been at Calistoga 5 years, but in my previous community, I attended a lot of these meetings, and we talked about where to put halfway houses, minimum security prisons, hazardous waste sites. So I'm here to tell you, when you talk about not my backyard, I'm thrilled to be talking about a bike trail. Thank you.
This goes back to the perspective we talked about earlier.
Just a quick question. The difference between a primary class 1 and a plain class 1, what's the distinction between primary and non-primary?
Not much. It's really to set the priorities, high, medium, or low. The primary.
Physically, there's no.
Who gets the money first? All right, any last questions? Yes, let me come to you. How are you today?
My one and only question about bicycling, I don't ride a bicycle, but can you please stay off the sidewalks up and down Lincoln? I mean, people are sitting in chairs, people like me with a cane, other people with walkers and riders and so forth. If you're riding on your bicycle, you can run into people and endanger people. If you walk your bicycle on those 2 blocks, okay, you can walk your bicycle, at least you have control over it. But if you're sitting on a bicycle and pedaling, and somebody steps out in front of you, what are you going to do? How are you going to stop them?
You can hit him with your cane.
Well,
So I couldn't agree more. We'll consider that our public service announcement that we're going to end on. First and foremost, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your input. Thank you for understanding that this is the beginning of a process. Everybody needs to be heard. Everyone is welcome to be heard. And again, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and hear jackhammering in a trail going in. But what I would suggest is if you're capable, get yourself on a bicycle, ride around town. We live in an amazing place for cyclists. We want to do it. We want our kids to do it safely, and that's what we're all about. So I'm going to officially close this meeting. If anyone wants to linger with a couple questions for me, happy to do so. Otherwise, go home and enjoy it. Thank you guys. And thank you to the bike committee.